Student housing is such a unique industry. The more unique an industry is, the more important it is for that industry to have a resource and a platform to share ideas and data, to determine best practices, and a platform to simply promote networking among the professionals in that industry. That's what we are setting out to provide with Student Housing Insight. But what's even more unique about the student housing industry is how unique those professionals are. They want to make a positive impact on the students and the university communities they serve. They understand they have an opportunity to touch the future. They come to work every day looking for ways to make that future bright. If you're one of those people, come be a part of Student Housing Insight. Well, welcome to Shop Talk, everyone. Hope you're doing well. Would love to see some comments in the chat if you can hear me, and would love to find out where everyone is calling in from or watching from, I should say. Again, this is Shop Talk. This is the monthly webinar for the student housing operators in the space that are operating in the U.S. and Canada. So welcome. If this is your first time, if this is your first time attending, would love to see that in the chat as well. I want to go through a couple of things. Number one, if you don't know me, I'm Wesley Dees. I'm the CEO of Student Housing Insight. We are also the host of this webinar. I want to go through a couple of things before we get started here. Give me just a second. One, let's talk about having to chat. If you want to chat, make sure that you go over to depending on what kind of device you're on, it's either going to be on the right-hand side or down below. Would love to see any comments that you got about what we're talking about today, and also would love to get questions from you as well. I'd just ask you one thing. If you want to ask a question for the panel, just put a Q in front of that chat. That way I can earmark that. My producer, Jan, can earmark that and make sure that we get it posted for our panelists. So with that being said, I want to go ahead and switch over to how we open up most of these shop talks, and that's getting a policy and legislative update from our friends at NMHC and Dave Borzos. Dave, how are you?
Wes, it is hot here in DC. You should have asked everybody who's putting in the chat what the temperature is where they're at, because it is, we've had like 3 days in a row of over 100 degrees. So it's toasty.
It's been hot here in South Carolina as well. I think our heat index was 106 yesterday. So that is I feel like that's a lot worse in DC.
Oh no, we're up there. So yeah, I think everybody's getting it right now. So anyway, as always, happy to provide an update to everybody who wants to hear a little bit about Washington DC. I don't have a huge amount of updates today, but I have a couple important ones. You know, the first one, which we have talked about in the past, still out there. Kind of, I equate it to the NHL season, which starts in October, and even though they're skating on ice, it ends in June. You know, it just keeps on going and going. The big beautiful bill clearly dominating anything that's going on in Washington right now. And an update from the last time we talked, you know, with the House. Got something approved, not easy given a small margin of difference between the Republicans and Democrats, and the Republicans needed everybody on board to get it passed, which they did by one vote, which means, you know, if things change, it may be difficult to get it back over the finish line. With that said, the Senate is now on the clock, and they have put out a proposal as well, which is going to cause some amount of stir in the House, because there are certain features and things that they're asking for that the House may not want. And you don't know with that one vote margin whether that's going to push some things back over the finish line. The one thing I will tell you that I believe that both the Democrats and the Republican parties have eliminated fiscal responsibility from their what they are doing, because I think both have talked about it in the past, and clearly neither party pays any attention. It's kind of like you know, giving your kid a credit card with an unlimited balance and go spend it, right? And I think that's what we're doing. And but with that in mind, we focus a lot on protecting our industry, and that's clearly extremely important. And the first thing was to kind of preserve some of the things that were favorable in the 2017 Act, such as the interest rate, estate exclusion, et cetera, and things of that nature. And it so far, everything has come out favorable from that perspective. There are some elements as well. One of the things, if you remember, there was a significant reduction in the corporate tax rate to make it, let's call it, more competitive the rest of the world. And a lot of the real estate industry utilizes pass-throughs, LLCs, for doing their business, and that wouldn't have been impacted by that lowering of tax rate. So what they ended up doing was a technical provision which gave all of the real estate industry a greater deduction to kind of equate the tax rates. And we wanted to preserve that. And the House actually went a step further and increased that by about 15%. So that was favorable. And the Senate came back and said, no, we're not going to do that. So there are a lot of things that are being negotiated, a lot of things that are up in the air right now. There was a goal to get it done before July 4th. Normally, the House and Senate are out next week, but if this thing isn't done, you know that they're not going to the beach. So stay tuned. We will obviously next month probably give you some update in terms of, yes, this got done, and more definitive, final determinations of what stayed in and what made its way out. So in general, it's either one of those two proposals are pretty favorable for the real estate industry. So the one interesting component, again, for I know a lot of the listeners are more on the kind of operation technology side. There was an interesting provision inserted in there, which prevented state and local jurisdictions from passing any legislation regarding AI. So that's kind of an interesting and big provision because my colleague Kevin Donnelly, who runs our Real Estate Technology Transformation Center, in a conversation with a member, said that they've done a rough count. There's about 1,000 bills across the country that would have some impact on AI. And I'll give you, some of them are just over the deep end. One of them, I think somewhere in Maine, would have prevented our industry from tracking others' rents on a spreadsheet, on an Excel spreadsheet. That's real strong AI. So I think a lot of policymakers are just, scared of what it means and what it can be. And there's, I think we're kind of like, well, you all need to step back and, understand this before you're passing crazy legislation. So that really is, as you can imagine, dominant in terms of what people are doing. The Fed decided to keep interest rates the same, even though inflation seems to be a bit tame at the moment. And the president took to his favorite social medias to, disparage the Chairman Powell, talking about who he's going to replace him with when his term expires, et cetera. And so, the Fed only impacts what we call the front end of the curve. So floating rates, short-term rates, right? They don't impact the 5-year or the 10-year, which a lot of financing for student housing properties or for apartments are priced off of that 5 or 10-year. So that's kind of what they're getting a lot of grief for the short-term rates, but it's really the longer-term rates that impact single-family homes and what we finance. So the Fed doesn't impact that. So there is a lot of heated discussion, a lot of name calling, and a lot of things being thrown around. But I think people need to step back and realize that's kind of not the part that's I would call most important to the mortgage industry, regardless of whether it's single family, multifamily, student, is really the longer dated treasuries, which the Fed does not impact. So, stay tuned for more name calling. It's going to continue to happen. Regulation relief. We talked about before a letter that we sent to the administration. We've sent to a number of agencies about regulations that we believe are harmful to our industry and broadly the multifamily industry. So we are looking for relief from a number of those. And, very bluntly, this administration is much more open to that type of movement than the prior administration. So I think we're in a good position in that regard. And then the other side of that is, asking for regulations to go away or really kind of saying no. And we are looking to say yes. And so I think, one of the things that we're doing and one of the things we're getting asked by both members on the Hill, HUD, by the regulator Fannie and Freddie is like, what should we be doing? And we've had some very interesting discussions over the last couple of weeks. So more to tell. We're kind of really early into that. But I think there's some favorable things that people are thinking that could be impactful to our overall industry. So we're pretty optimistic about that.
Okay.
Fannie and Freddie, big topic of discussion. President started to say some stuff about it. There was something called a sovereign wealth fund that was proposed. Look, I think all of that, just given what I mentioned about getting the big, beautiful bill done, has really been pushed to the sideline. And we had a meeting next to the White House, in the building next to the White House last week, with somebody who would be very involved in that. And he said in no uncertain terms, this is not happening this year. So I think he didn't say it's not happening next year, but it's something that people thought, oh, they're going to start moving on it right now. And I just think that's not going to happen immediately. And it's a highly complex. The other part of that is, I think because there's no uniform agreement on Capitol Hill about what to do with Fannie and Freddie, if anything moves forward, it's going to be done within the confines of what the administration can do. So Treasury, FHFA, other agencies would be involved in this, but whatever the statute, and whether what's been passed by Congress in the past, that's probably going to frame what they can do. And it's going to limit what they can do in terms of helping get them out of conservatorship. So, we're all over this. We'll continue to communicate as we learn more about this, because obviously Fannie and Freddie are important components of providing capital to the student housing industry.
And Dave,
yeah,
because we've got a lot of folks that are on the operation side and they don't get into the weeds on the finance side. Can you explain a little bit about what that release from conservatorship could potentially mean for the industry?
Look, that's a great question. I had this discussion with somebody yesterday, and we have a bunch of summer interns, and I was talking to them. I was like, what does it do? It's actually unclear. And I think some people view it as the last piece of unfinished business from the great financial crisis in 2008 to get them out of conservatorship, allow them to operate without a conservator, but just a regulator, which a regulator kind of has just more oversight and kind of give them some guidance, but a conservator really can make determinations of what you can or can't do and tell you what you can or can't do. So it changes a little bit of the business model. A lot of people feel that they would be more innovative. A lot of people feel that they would be able to, put out new products and be more competitive versus being in this conservator role, which some people have used the term they've been HUDified. So I think just purely from let's call it a little bit more operational, a little bit more financial freedom, but still with a regulatory oversight is kind of where people are thinking about that. The downside, to be honest with you, is that if you go down this path where you don't involve Congress, and you somewhat make them look like they did prior to 2008. They're in much better financial shape than they were. So there's a lot of those things that are different. There is some concern is in an economic strife, would they be as available in the marketplace to provide financing as they have been in the past? Clearly, exceedingly important, right? When the market's gone down during COVID, during the great financial crisis, they were there to provide financing.
Mm-hmm.
The other potential that a lot of people talked about, depending on what that structure looks like when you release them, will mortgage rates go up? And right now, everybody would be afraid of that happening. And I think that's also holding up things up, because that would have a negative impact on ownership of single family home or financing of apartments and student housing. So you're going to be very cautious to make sure that they don't disrupt the market.
Gotcha.
And the last thing that we're monitoring, but there really hasn't been that much of an update, is kind of what's happened to the Department of Education, right? There's a lot of discussion about downsizing, which they have. They cut 50% of their staff. They were going to move certain things over to other agencies. They were going to, the whole debacle from FAFSA last year, people worried about access to student loans, which has certainly had some negative impact, but they haven't done a lot since some of the initial foray into kind of like, hey, we're going to get rid of this. And so again, something we're monitoring. We will clearly keep you guys up to date on that. I know we talked about this last month. There's not really an update, but it's just something that we're certainly monitoring for the industry.
Yeah, my biggest concern is just with the reduction in staff, what that's going to do from as far as getting funds released this fall. Anything on that at all? Or because I know there was some discussion. Of course, this is what if there was an elimination of the department, that was it the Small Business Administration would possibly put those out?
Again, a lot of that's been discussed. Nothing's
happening. Okay.
Right? So,
gotcha.
They haven't withdrawn, they haven't stopped, but it's just nothing. There's not really an update in terms of that at the moment.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, and if anyone in the audience has any questions for Dave, please certainly put those in the chat. We'll be looking for that. Dave, I want to have you on for the beginning of our industry event, the upcoming industry event segment, because you guys open up registration this week for the annual Student Housing Conference, which is going to be in Scottsdale in October. Want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we're excited to go to Scottsdale. I think people like Scottsdale more than they do Las Vegas. So we've been in Scottsdale a number of times in the past, and it's always a great venue to go there. I did, before we got going today, I checked the temperature there, and they actually have an extreme heat index. The expected temperature is somewhere between 110 and 116 there today. So better not be that hot in October. But in any case, kind of the same format that we've done in the past. We will kick off kind of midday on Monday the 20th, full slate of panels. And we've actually got a really interesting keynote speaker that I literally got the signed contract today. He's got kind of talks about geopolitical impacts to the U.S. economy. And I heard him at another event, and he was very fascinating. So I think we're excited to have him. And then, a lot of the, people and et cetera that we've featured in the past, and the types of panels. We'll talk about capital markets. We'll talk about operations, technology, a lot of those types of things. And then on that last day, we will have a property tour and hosted by the Scion Group. So we're excited to do that on the third day as well. So we're looking forward to seeing people out there. And the registration opened up, as you mentioned, on Tuesday this week. And, the early bird registration continues through the hot summer all the way till September 19th. So we hope to see people out there.
Well, great. Yeah, we'll get that registration link in the Jan just posted it there. So if you want to go check out the schedule and registration, you can do that there. We are also going to be hosting, the past couple of years that it's been in Vegas, we've done the annual Top Golf Mixer, and or I should say it's turned into an annual Top Golf Mixer. And we were looking at, hey, what kind of event do we want to have, for NMHC? And there happened to be a Top Golf just a couple miles down the road, and we're like, let's do that again.
Yeah.
This year we're doing things a little bit different, and we're actually using this opportunity as a fundraiser for the College Student Mental Wellness Advocacy Coalition. We've got of course, the survey going out this year and some other resources that are certainly require funds to do that. So we wanted to put something together to help benefit them, and so we'll be doing that on the 21st. And actually, really quick, we've got the folks over at Point in Time Studios put together a quick kind of a promo recap of the last one. So I'll play that really quick, and we'll come back in just a second. So there you go. You can go to our website to the events page and find in our events calendar, you'll find a link to that, so you can find out more information about sponsoring the event, donating to the silent auction, and all the things that are related with that event. Looking forward to it. Dave, anything else?
No, I'm looking forward to seeing you out there, Wes, and everybody else. So I'm excited for it. Thank you.
Awesome. We'll talk to you next month.
Absolutely.
All right. And so there are just a couple of other events I wanted to go over. I mentioned back in May that we've got a collaborative partnership that we're doing with BizNow on some of their student housing stuff. They just used to do just one event a year. They're now doing several summits. There's one that is coming up. It's a little bit more higher education focused towards the universities in the area of Atlanta, but it's opened up to student housing as well. And that is on July 30th. These are great summits for networking. It's typically just a half of a day. So if you're in the Atlanta area, make sure you check that out. Again, you can just go to our events page. Jan's already put the link up, but you can go to our events page and look at the calendar for all of these events with BizNow, as well as other industry events. And if you've got an industry event that you want to promote on our calendar, please contact us at contact@studenthousinginsight.com, and we'll get back to you. BizNow also has a virtual summit that is coming up on September 24th, so make sure you check that out as well. And coming up in July I know we typically get a few folks from the higher ed and on-campus housing side of things. Wanted to make sure you're aware of the College Pads Star Res Off-Campus Global Summit and Connect, or I should say Off-Campus Summit and Global Connect. It's coming up in Denver next month. I'll be there with Jason Taylor and Chris Ancazer and Mark Miller from it's Gilbane. I can't remember they've just rebranded everything. Sorry, Mark, I missed that. I missed the name. I should have put that in there. But we'll be providing an update on what's going on in the off-campus and P3 world. So if you're there, make sure you let me know and let's connect. With that being said, I want to switch over to the pre-leasing segment and bring on Charlie with College House. Charlie, how's it going?
You know, the world is changing given the fact that I'm wearing a collared shirt and Davis is wearing a t-shirt. Something is off in this world, but
I should have kept Dave on for that transition. So
I know I was going to have my little jab. And NMHC now is the last days on my birthday, so he loves me. He just doesn't vocally share that with everybody.
Well, hey, we're getting here towards the end of the leasing season. This is typically when we see a lot of those, trend lines, get in shape with the years past. And so you've got some things that we need to talk about today.
Yes, a lot of things to talk about. Positive news in that regard. National pre-leasing sitting at 82.3%, about 80 basis points ahead. Round numbers, point ahead. This time last year, we saw a little bit of the first trend upwards of that summer slump from some of the delays that we saw from a FAFSA perspective was part of it. Obviously, there's a lot of other things there, but 80 basis points ahead, where last year, if you look at where final occupancy ended, it was about 90 basis points below. So be back to where kind of occupancy had landed fall 23, if I'm saying that correctly. Positive news really across the space. I'd say the Southeast and the West are really showing the most outperformance. I mean, the Midwest is, flat year over year from a positive perspective. The Southwest, I think the peak of velocity being behind was roughly about 4.5% earlier this year. So, you're about 90 basis points behind year over year in the Southwest, which is your, Texas, Arizona markets, pretty large from a standpoint of beds in a lot of those, College Station, Austin, Tucson, Tempe, et cetera. But yes, starting to see some strong leasing throughout the summer months. We also just put out a little report. We highlighted some of the, month over month gains, looking at it from what happened last year versus this year. And some of these, in some markets where even supply has been a challenge, you're seeing some strong gains there on the demand side. So definitely positive. I know we're getting close to, I'd say, what I would call deal season, or it's already pretty much been underway. But the stronger the lease up, the better the sentiment to the investment community. Where rent growth, call it 4.4%, give or take, about $1,000, $1,009 annually. I would say you're relatively flat as it relates to the West and the Southwest, give or take. But you're still seeing some stronger top line performance here in the Southeast, Midwest, and Northeast. This hasn't really been a huge year as it relates to new developments. But if you want to look at same store, so this would back out the 32,000 beds that are in lease up, you're roughly about 4.8, 4.9%, and that average rate is roughly about 990, 995. So generally speaking, across the board, fundamentals are super strong. Pre-leasing's ahead, and rates are still, elevated above the normal, 1 to 3% levels.
Gotcha.
This is where it gets a little interesting. For your larger unit types, 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, again, call 30 basis points flat. You're seeing, sizable outperformance there from the 3s, 4s, and 6s. Again, the 6s are very, very small in the comparison of a number of beds perspective as we're looking at here. But with the 4s and 3s, the 4s being the largest, I think, call it 400 plus thousand beds in this analysis here. Starting to see the first, at least since probably early November, December, the first semblance of outperformance there from a demand side on those 4 bedrooms from a national perspective. Which again, we've seen these numbers fluctuate up or down behind 2-3%. But the studios and the 1 bedrooms have all caught up. I think the studios and the 1 bedrooms were 3-4% behind throughout various points of the year too. So we're kind of rounding things out and seeing some demand kind of flip-flop from negative to ahead. Specifically, those 3s, 4s are what's really driving that number.
Have you ever put this data into a because we're gonna go to the line graph kind of showing the past 5 years. Have you ever done that with the floor plan?
Not on one of these reports, but my team is creative and can do that. I've seen, we've looked at it in some of the markets. I mean, you can do that on our platform in the market level, but generally speaking, something to look at. I don't have it off the top of my head.
It'd be interesting. I mean, now that you've got a good 4 or 5 years of trends, it'd be interesting to see how that, or threes, leasing up, kind of consistently year over year, the same time, I don't know. It'd just be interesting to look at. But hey, now you've got we've got the average rates on the floor plan level.
Yeah. And so to your point on like what's driving, I mean, if you look at one of the big, I guess, topics of conversation the last couple of years has really been, the affordability. One of the things that's noteworthy here is, from a national perspective, again, every market's different, but the threes are actually cheaper on a monthly basis than the fours, which you're seeing, 6.7% on average there for the 3 bedrooms, where the fours are 2.3. So, you still see a similar trend as it relates to, I'd say, affordability being a driver here, given the fact that from a pre-leasing perspective, your ones are ahead of your studios. And right now, given the studios are in normally newer inventory, it's actually a discount for a 1-bedroom versus the studio from a national perspective. So definitely something to look at. And a lot of this is driven, market specific, a lot of different nuances across the board from a macro aggregate level. Your threes really in fives are a little bit more than the 6 bedrooms, are your leaders here.
Gotcha.
This is the bar chart, so you can kind of better understand that. Of course, I'm not evil. I now flip this so I don't make you do math off the get-go. But this is what Wes was mentioning as it relates to the 5-year trend. And we've highlighted the most recent data or date, so you can see how this compares to the last 5 points in time, 5 years. So one thing that's definitely interesting is if you look at AY 23, 24, and then AY 24, 25, and AY 25, 26, plus or minus a few basis points in there, generally in line. But what's wild to see is definitely, there's plus or minus 7% there ahead of 21, or AY 21, 22 for this was, coming off the COVID era. So everything's happening quicker. I was speaking with a handful of operators. It's like, there's no real downtime. They're planning move in, launch, with Labor Day being their only saving grace there. So definitely seeing an earlier leasing where if you want to back up to, if you want to take a step back to like the beginning of the semester, or sorry, more figuratively, less you're making actions there. You're almost 50% there by January, where previously you were in the, the 35 range. If you want to go to like AY 22 and 21. So you're definitely seeing things happen sooner, but we're, I guess, since April, velocity has increased from a year-over-year perspective. The summer slump from last year, again, it's hard to kind of visualize this with the lines being so close to each other. We've made up a lot of ground from that. Where ultimately, last year occupancy was down about 90 basis points. We're ahead 80 basis points from pre-lease, so should end up still somewhere around that 92+% from a final occupancy for the sector, which would be the 4th year in a row where that has been close, because last year was like 91 point something. But fundamental strong. There's definitely been some markets where you've seen some drops, and from a rates perspective, a lot of that's driven in some of these by the supply that's kind of been absorbed into the market. But we're not seeing any aggressive trend lines. The middle line you see there was the banner year there of 23, 24. So that would be physical years from the fall 22 and the beginning of, and then the early half of 23 for at least 23, 24. We saw, incredible numbers there. And then that persisted a little bit into the following leasing cycle as well. So still moving from a standpoint of growth. We're down $1 for month over month, but generally speaking, the velocity is there to, we're not wildly behind where you'll see some massive sort of reversion downward is the short answer.
Yeah, no, it's a much different trend line than
the
other one, that's for sure.
It's definitely not. And I think that's just, some of these markets, where there has been supply, there has been a lack of supply. You've definitely seen some shifts. There are markets out there that are still getting teens, but they haven't seen new supply in 3 or 4 years. You have markets that are now negative in the teens, but have seen a lot of that. So definitely an interesting perspective, but at the same time, was reviewing a number of tier 1, tier 2 universities, and enrollment's rate is up in the 1, 2, 3% in a lot of those cases. So outlook still remains strong. We're now ahead on the leasing cycle, so got about, call it what would that be, almost 60 days left, give or take, if you want to call the 31st the last of the last leasing cycle. I know a lot of these Southeast markets move in sooner, but things are shaping up well.
Yeah, it's good to see that from a national. I know every single market is a little bit different, and there's some things that are kind of frustrating to some folks, some that's surprising to others.
Oh, for sure.
But yeah, from a national and even a regional standpoint, everything seems really strong. So, well, great. Any other? I'm sure everybody wants to know, because we had to pre-record the last one. How did the fishing trip end up? Did you bring home anything that's now on your wall, or?
It was a good time. Nothing picture worthy. I guess, well, that's taped onto my wall. I do have a picture up there of the one I caught a while ago, but anyway, no, it was good. A nice little time down south. So appreciate you recording that, and to Will and to Greg for doing that as well.
Yeah, no, thanks. I appreciate it. Well, hey, we're going to move on to the topic of the month and talk about budgets, and we'll talk a little bit about how these rates are impacting revenue projections as well. So thank you so much, Charlie.
Absolutely. We'll see you next time. Thank you.
All right. Let's bring our next folks on. Let me hide this banner really quick. Showing up our question. Hey, guys. How are you?
Hey, how's it going?
Hello.
Doing fantastic. Number one, I want to thank you guys for jumping into this panel. I'll have you guys introduce yourselves in a second, but to let the audience kind of know what we've gone through this week, we had somebody teed up to talk about what's going on with international students. She kind of contacted me not last minute. She contacted me on Monday and said, "Hey, I can't make it happen." And so I was like, reached out to our leadership committee and said, "Hey, I got to do a quick pivot. What do you guys think about talking about budgets?" Because it's one thing that we had kind of mentioned. This is the perfect timing, because folks that are on, an academic fiscal cycle, this is kind of the perfect time for them to kind of understand what everybody else is going through as they're finishing up their process and getting approvals, and other folks that are on a calendar year are starting to have those conversations about starting up budgets. So fantastic panel today. I'll let you guys introduce yourselves. Tony, let's start with you.
Hey, Wes. Thanks for having us on. My name is Tony Bufka. I'm Senior Vice President of Operations with Asset Living.
Jessica, we'll go to you next.
Okay. Jessica Nix, Chief Marketing Officer. I am with CLS Living.
Hey, I'm Angela Abraham. I'm the EVP of Asset Management and Operations with Student Quarters.
Well, as the title there says today, from CapEx to ChatGPT, what's driving next year's budget? By the way, we're not going to talk about ChatGPT, but we're certainly talking about AI. It just CapEx and ChatGPT just look better in the title. So, but hey, really quick, I just kind of want to go around the horn with you guys. Calendar year, fiscal year. I know both of you guys are doing, both. Is there one that you prefer over the other?
I typically always prefer calendar year, and it's because it captures turn costs, it captures any rent increases, it gives you a different picture.
Yeah, you always got to come back and reforecast income, though. That's the tough thing. Ladies,
we do calendar year, so definitely gives you some good certainty on the revenue side for the first 7-8 months. The last tail end's a little bit of a guess, but provide some stability there.
I had to ask people because I only care about marketing and leasing. I spend the money and I make the money and I don't, whatever. But we're actually on a fiscal year. And Wes, to your point, I mean, we started off on an academic year. It was our JV partners that requested it. But, we don't know what we're going to do with rates for that, latter part of the year. So it definitely isn't ideal for, I guess, perfect forecasting, but that is what we do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and now with CLS living, moving into the conventional world, it'll be interesting to see what those JV partners are. So.
Yes, true.
Well, hey, I want to start off with rental revenue. Initially, the questions I kind of gave you guys in advance, I wasn't even going to talk about rental revenue because I didn't think there was a lot to talk about. But based on our prelim call, I felt like, hey, this is worth a question. Again, don't want to discuss specific markets, but did the rate tiers and the blended rates that you rolled out last fall, have they proven out, or did they end up being way off? Who wants to go first?
I'll go. I think for the most part, what we put on our rate workbooks ended up working out. I would say there's probably a handful of exceptions to that, and those were unfortunately probably to missing as opposed to exceeding. There's just a few markets that the supply impacted things a lot more, not only the purpose-built supply, and probably get into it, as lots of competition with conventional. And I think people are, our markets are much quicker to come off the rates, really valuing occupancy above that. So people kind of responded in lockstep.
I can go next. Flagship schools, not naming markets, flagship schools have done very well, especially if there was not new supply. Beautiful year, like seasons past. And then, one thing that I was, listening to Charlie and wondering if he could see any trends is the international students. With the political climate, a lot of us are talking about it, but where I have exposure there, I can see that in my leasing. And so, we are not trying to achieve the modeled out tiers the way they were originally designed, because we're trying to be a lot more conservative right now, because there's a lot of unknowns on whether or not everybody's actually going to continue to come here for fall, or exactly how it's going to shake out where I have a lot of international exposure.
Yeah, I think asset overall, we had the same. Is basically we've been very pleasantly surprised by certain markets. There's been some smaller markets that have really come back. Power 5 markets, for the most part, we've done very well. So we've basically hit the mark. Yeah, there's a couple of markets here and there, or a couple of unique properties here and there that necessarily exceeded expectations. And then there's some that are slightly below. But for the most part, we did very well.
So I want to talk about, because in our prelim call, we started talking about the fact that we're all setting rates for the next year, so it doesn't have necessarily anything to do with the current fiscal cycle and the budgets. But now that you're coming up with stuff for fall 26, are you a lot of folks had double-digit increases. Are you expecting that? What's the conversation with your managers on things like that? What is it a time to get back to reality, I guess, is my real question here.
I think it is, but 3 and 5 is the new 3.5. So it doesn't have to go all the way back to 3.5. But I don't foresee myself setting a lot of 10% RRGs, or there needs to be something factored in there, something, enrollment growth, capital infusion, something. But I think the whole industry has felt like rental rate growth cool off a little bit, or at least in the markets, that's what, I'm seeing. And so, I try to be as realistic as possible. So I'm thinking 5-ish is probably the norm for us.
Yeah, that's what we're looking at for the fall as well. Unless you're going in, like Jessica said, unless you're going with some TI or tenant improvements, I don't see many properties getting over that 9%. There might be some unique properties or unique markets again that we're going to see that trend. We're going to might see some properties truly at that 3.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say, 7's probably going to be in some of our more aggressive markets. I think even in markets where we still don't see the supply coming down the pipeline, I think there's been, these markets have experienced 10 to 15% rent growth several years in a row. And there's a psychological barrier at a certain point, especially when parents are looking at units today versus the same units when their children are freshmen. And they're just kind of putting their hands up.
Gotcha. Well, hey, let's move on to kind of that in between revenue and expenses and talk about utility recovery and sustainability initiatives. If there's anything you guys have launched in the past year or at a property you've seen launched in the past year for maybe one of your clients, are you seeing that, maybe it was a CapEx infusion on, more sustainable appliances, that type of thing. Are you seeing that move the needle at all? If you've gotten, maybe 3 to 6 months of actuals to look at that, you're saying, okay, we actually need to change this in the budget for next year.
We're not seeing that, and I think Dave pointed that out even in the earlier segment. I think with what's going on in Washington, those incentives at a federal level really aren't there anymore.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, the big portion of our portfolio is somewhat newer, so you're not really going to get as much juice out of the squeeze there. And the majority of our initiatives have been more common area associated than in the actual units. We just haven't honestly seen the residents really analyzing the utility costs for as smart as they are, and as much as they analyze the menu of other fees. There's not as much apples to apples comparison on the utility side.
Gotcha. Wait, I want to move on to marketing expenses. And Jessica, since you're kind of our marketing pro on this panel, I want to start this with you. But were there things that you learned last cycle that is impacting the next cycle's spend from a marketing standpoint? Are you going back to your clients and to your ownership group and saying, hey, I don't have to spend as much money next year?
No. But let me tell you how we're going to make a lot of money together. Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, it's not exciting, but yes, everybody's on their phone, but thank goodness they're back on campus. And I think it's, more affordable to speak to the Greeks and do the tables and do things like that. But if all the time, what's more important, digital or guerrilla? And you need both to maximize your spend and to get in front, like every possible way to get in front of these students. So I'd say that the direction that we're going in for us is, we have promoted Erin Mahone. She's our SVP of Innovation and Implementation. And sometimes it takes a little money to invest in something that will ultimately make you more efficient and to save. And even though that's the case, I'm always hearing that, I need you to be more innovative, and you can spend the same that you spent last year, but you can't spend more, you can spend differently. And so we've taken a hard look now with Erin, the ability for her to like usher these initiatives that maybe we were too busy with a day job or marketing and leasing, all the everything that keeps you busy. If we have ideas and we want to move in a certain direction, we now have a resource to help push that through. So we're looking at all of the marketing and leasing spend, and we're trying to apply the 80-20 rule, where 80 is on, the fundamentals of things that we know we have to do. And then 20% is into more innovative opportunities. So something I'm seeing, this happens every so many years. It feels like it hasn't happened in a while, but it's convergence, where I'm working with one vendor for maybe it's AI, for marketing and leasing, automated conversations, that now they can also do texting, or now they can also do something else. So now I'm taking a hard look at all of my vendors and making sure that for the same price, I could get texting, I could get this, I could that. And now I can eliminate kind of these fringe vendors and save money there to invest into the next big thing. And so for us, we are looking at the consolidation of our tech stack and making sure that, we're getting the most functionality out of our investment. And then for CLS Living, we're working with a company to build out a customer acquisition engine, which, we talked about this when we were preparing. Our gut tells us, I know the profile of my client for each property. But this is going to use AI to string my systems together. So it might be, Google Analytics. It might be my pay-per-click trends. It might be information I have in Entrata or anything else where I have information about my residents. And it's going to string that together to give me a clear profile, economic, behavioral, whatever I potentially can know about my customer, so that I can be exact in targeting. I can be exact in the type of message that needs to go with a type of image to target a very specific student. And, a lot of this is stemming from what, Donald Trump did in his first administration, where he worked, he got Facebook intelligence and he worked with an overseas agency to really fine tune his messaging for different demographics. And, ethically, that's what we're doing. We want to make sure that we are just scientific, and every penny spent, as if anything is a penny anymore, is as exact as possible to appeal to the right resident and get them to our properties. So we're excited about that. That's what's new for us.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that conversation has come around, at least every 3 cycles, probably more like 5 cycles. But I feel like with what's happened with AI in the past couple of years, it seems like, this is the most excited I've seen you talk about it over the past
week. It happened in the past 6 months. I'm like, oh, call me back in 10 years when AI can do something for me. And now it's like all of a sudden things are like starting to click, and it's starting to actually like make a difference. And I might have thought that, a lot of people work with Elise AI. And when we were first getting into it, okay, I need you to answer the easy questions for all of my prospects, the 30% of the easiest questions. Can I have a cat? Can I have a dog? Stuff like that. But now we're starting to see the things that we never thought about that AI could help with. So it's kind of like these fringe solutions that are coming off that I thought I was going from A to B, but actually there's more AI can do for me, over in left field that I didn't see coming. So it is getting much more exciting now.
Yeah. Well, that may be a whole nother podcast episode that we have to do, but Tony and Angela, anything on the marketing side that within your portfolios that you're saying, hey, let's take a lesson from last year and let's change some things up this year?
Yeah, I think, I think Charlie alluded to it earlier that, every market is starting earlier and earlier. But, what we're kind of seeing is that even the markets starting earlier, they're going longer into the summer, and where, before I'd look at a budget and be like, oh, this market's usually done by March. We can cut off pay-per-clicks. We can, only do a 6-month subscription here. They'll be done. We're coming back with asks to go through the summer because that last kind of 20% is really dragging, into spring and summer. So we can't really toggle on and off some of these resources that we would in prior years. And, we're also going to a little bit more bespoke, customized marketing plans for each market. We're using more hyper-local resources and apps, tapping into more NIL and micro influencers. So we'll see more of that in our budgets this year too.
Yeah, it's similar with us. We're using focus group data to kind of tell us that as well. We do this in a lot of markets that we're trying to get those keys, just not for marketing, but capital improvements and things like that. I think we're still set. The calendar's changed, right? It used to be renewals in the fall, and we would wait 3 months and then say, hey, well, okay, we got X. Now it's time to start. That the January date that we had 15 years ago of rolling out new leases is just gone. Now it's October 1st. In some markets, it's September 15th. So we're trying to fine tune those things as well to figure out what exactly is working in this particular market. And to be honest with you, because it worked in 1 year, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work the next year. We're also seeing that the trend is that the minute that somebody's looking at a concession that works, that they're copying it. if X concession is working, then we're seeing that in the market, then competitor Y is copying it almost immediately. So it's just fresh ideas constantly and consistently.
Gotcha.
And Wes, I wanted to add something. I made a note yesterday after we wrapped, and this is, I think, a helpful tip. Again, it's not that I am budgeting more. It's that I'm stuck with what I'm stuck with, and I'm spending differently. But I think for anybody that goes to a student convention or conference and you talk to any of the marketing vendors, one change that we're seeing is the classic search engine optimization, SEO. My funds are going to be pivoted to really focus on GEO, which is generative engine optimization. And that's so that when, especially our younger cohort of students, they're searching in ChatGPT. See, I'm just making your title work for you now, but they are searching for us there. And even though it pulls from Google, it pulls from all of these known entities, it skews based on what they prioritize in their search. It doesn't, you don't perform the same that you do in your Google search as you do it on ChatGPT. And you have to make sure that you do perform.
You're 100% correct. And I found that out yesterday on an asset management call. And because everything's coming in online right now, there's very little foot traffic with these particular properties. And I just went to ChatGPT and said, hey, in this market, what are some off-campus solutions? Mm-hmm. And those properties, my properties, were actually pulling higher than the other properties, the competitive properties in the market, which was really odd because our Google ranking was actually lower, and there's been no PPC spend or anything, no SEO. But the properties have just been in that particular market for much longer. And the reference links, this is so crazy. The reference links that were for my properties were actually from the competitive properties. I don't know why. It was so weird, but yeah, we've got to be thinking about
it's scary because I think that we all might have a Reddit article or we might have a review that we're not proud of. And to think that these generative engines are looking everywhere, not just based on the rules of the Google algorithm, it's scary. But I think that, you get overwhelmed and then you're like, nope, I have vendors for this and let's get creative. And, my cheat sheet says, because all you have to do is ask ChatGPT, how can I perform better in your search results? I think a lot of emphasis is going to Google My Business pages as the source of facts. So anyway, we're working with vendors to make sure that we're cracking the code on GEO. Depending on who you ask, they're going to say that only 0.5% of search is coming through these engines. Other articles will say 65%. I don't think anybody really knows, but I know it's happening. And in our industry where we have these digital natives that, we're just chasing the trends that they're setting. I know that we've got to figure out how to perform in those engines because that's their behavior.
All right. We are at 2 minutes before the top of the hour. I want to start ending these things on time and don't want to go over, but we've got payroll and human resources. We've got maintenance and supplies. We've got some other policy and legislative stuff. I'm going to leave it up to you guys. Do you want to go? Do you want to, maybe we record something separate?
I'm fine to.
I'm good.
Keep going.
Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and jump in really quick on the payroll side and sticking with that AI theme. Is AI making any impact on expenses at all at the property level when it comes to not necessarily staffing, but from a human capital standpoint, and maybe it's maybe you're seeing maintenance teams working smarter and not harder, and maybe that's having some kind of impact on the hourly spend. Anything like that you guys are seeing?
Yeah, we haven't seen it so much impact the office staff, but I think we just released a case study about our maintenance overtime and after hours. I think we've reduced those hours or those efforts on the maintenance team after hours by like 26%. using I think we use Elise AI. So that was really powerful. We found good success with it on the delinquency side. We don't want Elise AI trying to sell and lease. So that's not where it's going yet for us. So it hasn't really impacted that, but I'm sure the maintenance team likes not having to deal with it after hours as much. I'm not sure about Jessica or Tony.
I think that we're seeing it. We're not seeing it quite yet on the leasing side, as far as that the vast improvement. It's still information only, and as we talked about it, even the prep call, is that it's going to give you X information, and then you're going to scream at the phone that you want to talk to a human being.
Representative.
You know what? Come on. You've given me the rates. I know I can have a cat and things like that. And as Angela said, we're not asking it to sell. We're asking it to do very basic information and then go from there. I think that we're seeing the same thing with maintenance. Yes, it's curbing the non-emergency call. Like, I don't have a light bulb in my closet. That's not an emergency. We're not sending somebody out there right now. Yeah. So I think that's kind of where we're seeing the impact. You know what it's going to be like in 5 years? We don't know. I mean, we really don't know. We're, according to the Jetsons, we were supposed to have, in a
long time ago,
rocket car, by now.
Yeah, our company is in the exact same boat. We are still intrigued about centralization and leveraging AI. We are also doing focus groups with each role and discipline, because just because your job description says this doesn't mean that you're not number 2 in charge to cover coverage when somebody's out, or, to handle seasonal, challenges that come and go. So, but again, it's sort of like, you thought that you were going in a direction from A to B with AI, and maybe we haven't, reduced staff yet. We're exploring, we're learning, but what can AI do? Can it do entire digital, file audit? Oh, didn't think of that. So it's not necessarily the direct path of, this is how I staff the property, but there are some interesting solutions and interesting efficiencies that give it a little more time and let that stack up. And then I think that we'll see some payroll savings, but right now we're still exploring.
Got it. We'll do a quick fire round on this one. Any dramatic increases with overhead as far as benefits, et cetera?
Probably not benefits. I think we're seeing maintenance wages go up, though. In key states, we're seeing the maintenance tech wages go up significantly, and that's just a labor work shortage. I think we're going to start seeing that across the country.
Yeah, and we, I think when we on our prep call, we're reassessing kind of the part-time LCs, and even though more expensive on an hourly basis, are you getting more with full-timers? Comes with a higher cost. It'll come with more benefits, burden, and overhead. But we're starting to test out that model at more assets, which will be more expensive.
Gotcha. All right, let's shift to maintenance and supplies. I've seen a shift, and of course my view is somewhat limited, but I've seen a big shift to outsourcing more and more, especially with HVAC, but other services as well, to outside sources versus doing in-house repairs. How's this impacting OpEx? Are you seeing it at your properties? And, is there benefit to it, or is it more, to go back to the previous point, of just kind of the labor shortage on the maintenance side that a lot of folks are having to go to this?
Not necessarily. I think it's state by state. There is some legislation in certain states now with HVAC that a third party must do it. Are we going to start seeing more of that? That's going through. Yes, that's very much going to impact that. I wouldn't say overall that we're outsourcing more, though.
Yeah, I would agree.
It's so far from my part of the business, but
tell us what you think.
Yeah, but I can tell you that I'm not hearing about outsourcing, but surprise, surprise, I'm hearing about what more can we do with innovation and experimenting with, there's so many names that you see at conferences to help, make turn more efficient. So I know that is what the pressure of, being more efficient. But as far as outsourcing talent or resources, I haven't heard about that.
Gotcha. All right. Sticking with maintenance and supplies, any CapEx improvements at the properties from this past year that you see that are paying off with lower OpEx for this upcoming year?
I think we talked about it in our prep call. It's pickleball, right? I mean, we're gonna be talking about this. It's taking the old tennis court, and paving it, or it's taking the basketball court that the nets are constantly being torn down, and now it's a pickleball court, and sometimes that brings more residents out, and it's something that's what our focus always has to be, is about what's cool, what's current at the time. Obviously you're going to have modern gym, modern pool, modern study facilities, but then what's that 4 and 5 that really that your competitors don't have?
Yeah, as an avid tennis player, that irks me, but I get it. It's super popular. Not so much lowering OpEx, but we've really
and it could be increasing OpEx too. So
we've really taken a much more in-depth look, especially when a request comes from on-site, anything regarding access control, cameras, third-party security, patrols. We actually finally saw, I think most people finally saw some relief in property insurance last year. And I think a lot of people saw a lot of those savings be completely overtaken by changes in GL and excess, especially in student. It's just becoming a smaller and smaller pool. So we're really taking a much more stringent look at those needs across the properties. You can never guarantee safety, but addressing low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, we can do a whole nother episode on, and I think we should, on insurance, and because we got pretty deep in that discussion yesterday on the prelim call about some things that you guys are doing that it's not from a CapEx standpoint, but it's for it's more OpEx on the property in order to lower those rates. So I don't know if you want to talk about that really quick, Angela, but
yeah, I mean, we're just and it's almost on the property side as well. Any sort of incident is can have
it's devastating. It's devastating.
Whether it's a pipe burst or a break-in, we're just really focused on controlling what we can control.
Yeah.
That's really all you can do.
Yeah, I think we were talking about this yesterday. It used to be making sure the gate works, but making sure it's a better gate, making sure the intercom systems work, making sure that if that gate's down for one day, or making sure there's cameras around mailboxes, or there's proper lighting throughout properties. Some states now are requiring it, that you need to have a security vendor come and do, or the police department come and do a security assessment of there. And if that security assessment, comes back green, it's fantastic. You're doing what you need to do. Sometimes this is also helping our conversations with our investors and our clients, saying is that we need to do these things. This is a must.
All right. Last question: policy and legislative. Any state or regulatory policies impacting OpEx line items this year in any of your markets, positive or negative? We've kind of hinted around some of this on HVAC and other things, but anything specific that has stood out to you as you're going through this next budget season?
No, we'll let Dave handle that.
I did think it was interesting when he said that there was, a huge number, 1,000 pieces of legislation involving AI going through, and his example, I didn't like. I thought it was going to be fun and exciting and help, market and leasing. And he's like, you're not allowed to track, rates on a website. But, I've been through when, emailing was just going on.
It was actually tracking rates on a spreadsheet.
I know that was ridiculous, but I do worry, because it seems like even when, we were talking about texting, there's this overkill with legislation and then it gets dialed back. That's just how, they're chasing the trends and trying to keep up. So I just want to make sure that, we're paying attention to the rules around AI and how to use it so that we don't find ourselves in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. Preview for one of the upcoming podcast episodes. I've had it with the market tracking stuff, and
so hard.
I'm letting it all hang out and saying my piece and putting it out there. So be on the lookout for that later this summer. Anyone else on the policy and legislative?
No, I mean, on the insurance thing, the only thing that's going to help on the GL side is tort reform, and that'll be, probably state by state. So,
yeah,
I think it's every 18 months we'll expect the changes.
And it's going to get hotter and hotter when it's 3 months before election. So, well, guys, thanks so much. I appreciate you guys taking, of course, the extra time today, but also the short notice to do this. I think we're all better off for it, and really appreciate you guys joining in and giving your thoughts on this.
thanks.
Sounds great. Thanks for having.
I cut them off just a little bit too soon, but anyway, thanks, guys. Thanks to everyone that stood on for this extra 11 minutes, and appreciate everything that you guys do. Want to let you know, Thursday, July 24th will be the next Shop Talk. We do not do one in August, so this will kind of be your last chance to tune in and find out what what's going on with certainly with pre-leasing, and hopefully we'll have that guest speaker on international students will be able to give us a update of what to expect. International students are going to have a lot of things that are concerning them for this next year. And I think us as operators need to be very aware of that. So make sure that you look out for that. Listen, if I brought you any, if this Shop Talk episode brought you any value, please share it with your colleagues. They can go to shoptalk.info. Again, that's .info, not .com, but shoptalk.info. And they can find a link there to register to receive our email invites each month. And appreciate any type of reference you can give for that. But guys, thanks so much. We'll talk to you in July, and have a safe and hopefully cool, but at least hydrated next 4 weeks as everybody is heating up around the country. Take care.